Welcome to the podcast. It is NASCAR season again, and we've got Rod Mullins on the long line down from Southwest Virginia. We're going to start getting ready for. We've already had the Clash. We're getting ready now this weekend for Daytona 500. As we're all, at least here in the Mid Atlantic, digging out from snow, we can think about warm weather down in Daytona and gentlemen start your engines and all that fun stuff. Rod, it's been a couple of months. How you been doing, buddy?
Been doing okay, staying busy, but still doing okay so far. So,
Good deal, good deal. Well, what are the storylines heading into Daytona? Let's start with the big race.
well, the big race and the big storylines out of everything kind of go back to the Clash and the way things kind of led up to this point where we're at Daytona for this coming week and the start of the 2025 season. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Clash just a little bit because it was probably one of the more exciting short track promotional sort of races that I guess I could have ever watched. We saw tempers flare. We saw Ty Gibbs go airborne. We saw a bunch of cars being spun around, flipped around, and so forth. And we're still left with this feeling of a good, warm madhouse feeling because that's what Bowman Gray is referred to as the madhouse. And I think they definitely came away a winner with this because NASCAR had, if I'm not mistaken, NASCAR has kind of bought the rights to Bowman Gray Stadium, and they did some improvement to it. They put up a safer barrier, and they did some other improvements to the track. But you know what? It was just incredible watching that race, and it kind of set the stage for what we're going to see this coming weekend when we go to Daytona. And everything is on the line with this one. You've got teams that are starting to make their way into the sport for the first time. Hence, JR Motorsports or Junior Motorsports. That's one of the teams that's going to be trying to make the big dance on Sunday afternoon. And we've got some others trying to, make an attempt. We've got some people that's trying to make another go at it. Jimmy Johnson. We've got Martin Truex Jr. going to be trying to, at least get a win for another team this time around. So it remains to be seen what we're gonna deal with this coming weekend when they go to Daytona.
We've had five different winners the last 5 years. The last repeat champion is one of those, Denny Hamlin, back in 2019, 2020. So William Byron is the defending race champion, and he'll be looking to become one of, let's see, he'd be the fifth if he were able to get the back-to-back,
Right.
dating back to Richard Petty being the first. What do you think of his chances this weekend?
Well, you know what? Denny Hamlin, as a matter of fact, I put some notes up on Dickinson Media here just a little while ago. They had the morning practice session at Daytona, and Denny Hamlin was the pick of the crop right there. He was running at the front and running really well. But you can't really weigh a lot of things on Daytona, especially starting out and thinking, all right, they're running great. They run well in the duels and so forth. They're going to have a great race. But now you got to remember something here. There are drivers that have set on the pole and they have never finished as high as 14th in the way that the race has gone. You've had some races where some of them have finished in the top 10, but for some of these drivers who have won the pole before, 14th and on back is where they've ended up because of either wrecks or something else. For Denny Hamlin, I think a lot's on the line this year. He missed out on the playoffs last year. The big lawsuit with NASCAR and 2311 Motorsports, along with Front Row Motorsports, is kind of still hanging over his head. He was wondering whether or not they were probably going to have a place at the table this time around coming into 2025 with NASCAR. Open the door and let them come in and race this year, pretty much on the injunction that was filed back, I think, in December last year. And they came up with the information and the things that NASCAR, okay, you've got to do this in order for you to participate this year in the sport. And so they're doing that. But, we're still waiting on that big court case to kind of hash itself out here before all is said and done. But for Denny Hamlin, I think he's got a fair chance to win it. I would not rule out some other drivers out of this whole bunch. William Byron, he could end up being a back-to-back winner this time after winning last year. You've got him in there. And who knows what's going to happen with Richard Childress Racing and Kyle Busch. This will be his 20th race coming up this Sunday, the 20th Daytona 500. And for him, he hasn't won a Daytona 500, and he likewise joins Martin Truex Jr. in that mix. It's going to have to, I guess, it's all going to have to sort out a little bit about what we're going to be looking for with Richard Childress Racing and Kyle Busch this year, if whether or not he's going to be able to get back on the winning track and get things moving in a positive direction, or if he's just going to sit there and just spin his wheels like what he was doing in the Clash, people banging him around and then spinning him around. I look for Kyle Busch to kind of come out fighting in this Daytona 500.
Yeah, winless last year, but he was
Yeah,
running well towards the end of the regular season. Had a couple of chances to win his way into the playoffs. So yeah, he'll definitely be an interesting one to keep an eye on. You mentioned some of the the newcomers. Shane Van Gisbergen is not necessarily a newcomer. He's raced on the
right.
circuit the last couple of years, but he'll be competing for a full-time driver as a full-time driver for the first time this season.
Yeah, he will be. But, I think what's got everybody's attention is the addition, or at least who's going to try to get into the race this year, and that's Helio Castroneves. He's been a four-time Indy 500 champ. He has made the step into NASCAR, and he's going for Trackhouse Racing's Project 91 for the Great American Race. It's the fifth time they've raced the 91 car. And here's another little interesting thought with Helio Castroneves, from where he comes from his place of origin. Altogether, there's going to be four different countries represented altogether in this race. Now, we already probably know Daniel Suarez from Mexico, of course. You've got drivers from the U.S., but Castroneves from Brazil, and Van Gisbergen, who's from New Zealand. It's going to be the first time, well, I should say it's a tie for the first time since 2010, when these drivers, nationalities and so forth, have gotten together and will be racing. But that'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to seeing if Castroneves can make the dance. He's got to race himself in the duels. He also has to have a good qualifying effort, and he's going to get some practice on Saturday in an ARCA race, and hoping that, by chance, there's a little thing going through the garage area right now questioning whether or not NASCAR, who added some kind of a provisional sort of thing this year, when they were talking about it, if it's going to be an open door for Castroneves to make it in. And it's a possibility he could make it in because of Trackhouse Racing and so forth, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure Castroneves would like to prove himself out on the track instead of having a starting position handed to him.
So the schedule for the rest of the week, TV schedule that is, as you mentioned, Rod, we're recording this on Wednesday. There
Mm-hmm.
was a practice session this morning. Tonight, there's qualifying on FS1, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Another practice session tomorrow on FS1 at 5. The duel at Daytona is on FS1 at 7. And then on Friday, kind of a full schedule. FS1 has some more qualifying at 3 p.m. Eastern. Um, the Xfinity Series practice at 4:30, another practice session on FS1 at 5:30, the NCTS race at 7:30 on FS1, and
Mm-hmm.
then Saturday we've got qualifying, ARCA race, final practice. All. But we'll just say this: it's all on Dickinson Media right now. We'll have it on Augusta Free
Mm-hmm.
Press as well. So Rod has done a great job getting that schedule out for everybody. Let's go off the track, Rod,
Okay.
for the last part of this and talk about sort of the future of NASCAR from a money standpoint. We talk about this a lot when we do
Mm-hmm.
podcasts together, the business side of NASCAR. So, NASCAR President Steve Phelps was talking with Adam Stern of the Sports Business Journal about some money-related matters, private equity investments, global expansion. Give us some of the highlights of what they were talking about.
Well, I think a lot of it has to come from the fact of this big lawsuit that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports has filed. And they have been questioning since the beginning of whether or not NASCAR is a monopoly or not. They feel like NASCAR is a monopoly. And I really shouldn't say that Denny Hamlin is as much of a factor in this as much as Michael Jordan being such a big factor, because Michael Jordan is one of these business savvy people, and he's looked at this whole thing. He's gone into NASCAR, but he still feels like he's not exactly being treated right out of this whole thing. So, that's part of it. And the questioning about this, it's kind of left us now to open up the floodgates, is whether or not they're going to agree before it's over with that, yeah, maybe they have ran things as a monopoly, and the court is going to side with that, and they're going to say that we need to do some changes. And I think that's what Steve Phelps has them right now, and that is poised on a I think a position in order for them to be able to go and say, all right, we are going to divest of, family holdings and so forth, and we are going to go more for private equity investment into the sport. And if they do that, that's going to put them on the same plane as a Formula One and some of the other series that you have out there. But it could change things. The sports industry is evolving. It's evolving every day. Phelps said in the interview, he said, quote, 6 years ago, private equity firms weren't as focused on NASCAR as they are today. And he says he's had numerous conversations with these firms, and they're keen to invest in race teams. They want to understand the sport's future, and they're buying into what they're selling. So, what does that mean overall? It means that we may see global expansion before it's over with of NASCAR. And if that happens, we could not only just be racing in Mexico and Canada as we have before, but we could be racing. There is a rumor going around that the Clash in Brazil could take place next year. It may not happen at Bowman Gray Stadium. I would hate it if it didn't, but they're talking about moving the Clash, or at least having a Clash in Brazil next year. So we'll just have to wait and see. NASCAR already has a sanctioned series governing body in Brazil. So it would be interesting to see that, how it's going to happen. It also opens up the door, Chris, I think, for some other things, and that is whether or not you're going to have another car manufacturer into this whole mix before it's over with. There's talk right now that Chevrolet is scaling back. There's no Camaro anymore, although the bodies all look the same. It's going to be referred to as the ZL1 that's going to be on the track. So you've got the ZL1, you've got the Mustang, and then, of course, you've got the Toyota Camry. And for Chevrolet, they're kind of backing off. I don't know why they're kind of backing off at this point. They claim that they're still heavily vested in the NASCAR, but there's rumors going around that if they go national or international, I should say, we might be looking at a Cadillac brand into the sport before it's over with. That might be replacing a Chevrolet. Who knows how this is going to happen? But we're also still looking for possible foreign investment into it, whether it's a Volkswagen, whether it's a Nissan or something of that nature, or Honda. I think probably the best bet right now, that is, if they get past all this regulation and so forth, you probably heard about the Nissan Honda merger. They're wanting to merge together. This could be a great way for that team to finally make a big splash onto the worldwide scene by coming into NASCAR, and then they'll still have some, structure and some places that they belong to inside of IndyCar racing, and also, maybe whet the appetite for some of these corporate investors to get behind a Honda Nissan combination and see what they can do. But definitely NASCAR is taking more of I think, a worldwide approach instead of just worrying about the South anymore or worrying about the United States. I think they're looking at things on a global scale. Well, what we're going to be running into is cost, and that's going to be the bottom line. How much is it going to cost for these teams to be able to travel all the way around the globe, or travel to certain races that are going to happen around the globe? That's one of those things that's going to be open for questions if this big thing happens.
So, as we wrap up the podcast here, Rod, our regular listeners, longtime listeners will remember that several months ago you launched Dickinson Media.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to what you do covering NASCAR for us and for the NASCAR world, Dickinson Media, local news for Dickinson County down in Southwest Virginia. What do you have working, in recent days right now for Dickinson Media?
Well, right now we had a visit from the governor this past Sunday. He made a surprise kind of, I think it was already cleared on a Thursday, but he made a trip into Dickinson County, his 13th trip into Southwest Virginia since September of last year. And he came in with a couple of the other delegates and so forth, and state senators, to serve breakfast up to first responders, which I thought was a great way to just kind of get out there and press the flesh, so to speak. But there's still a lot of questions out there as to what's going to happen. You're talking about funding for fire and rescue units all across the Commonwealth. Where you're going to come up with money. They need funding. Some of these places already, like in Northern Virginia, Fairfax, and some of them, they're still struggling for money, even though they get a lot of what they need at times. But there's also times that they don't get it. And it seems like back in this part of the state, we're getting less and less of that money going toward fire and rescue. And I just think it's a very important thing that they need to be focusing on right now. And I think the other thing that people have been talking about is the Virginia High School League, and that is the coming out of the first thing and saying we don't support the national executive order from the president, and then backtracking, coming back now and saying, oh, we're going to support it. We're going to support that national executive order that was signed. It's just a piece of paper, folks, just like him changing over the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. It's just one of those things of, paperwork. But the Virginia High School League has now said they're not going to enforce that when it comes to transgender athletes participating in sports. So, they're not going to enforce it. They're not going to make them to where they can or anything of that nature. So we've kind of opened up another can of worms down here. That's been a popular I think, discussion by some people about the Virginia High School League because to some people in Southwest Virginia, there's sort of an adversarial kind of feel to sports here and also against the rest of the state with the Virginia High School League. So we'll just have to wait and see how this is all going to come out.
Yeah, local news definitely. We at AFB also got to look into how the funding freeze is impacting our local
Right.
governments, our local fire departments, as you mentioned, local nonprofits. Yeah, there's a lot to keep us busy, certainly in this day and age. Last few weeks with the new administration. So. Well, Rod, as always, thank you for your time. For our listeners, for our viewers out there on YouTube, we'll have a link to Dickinson Media so you can easily find what Rod's up to, and also links to our stories from Rod that are on Augusta Free Press covering the NASCAR beat. Rod, as always, man, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.